Bitcoin adoption.
Exactly.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, that's very cool.
So we can definitely get into this during the show too. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I had been running a different business. I started an agency business about 6 years ago,
Okay.
and then really went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole in the middle of that,
Right.
and then started adopting it personally and for that small business. And it had such a profound effect that my thinking was, man, every small business needs to,
Everyone needs it. Yeah.
everyone needs to figure this out.
That's pretty
So,
similar to me. I bought a company during COVID, long established construction business, and then pretty soon after started going down the rabbit hole with Bitcoin, and it had a massive effect on me. I actually sold my company because of Bitcoin. Um, Otherwise, I would have just been chasing more and more dollars. So I got to a point where I was like, I got enough Bitcoin now to sustain me for a little while. I'm gonna do what I love.
right. I mean, I think it's a common theme. You kind of are going one direction in life. You discover Bitcoin, then after that, you kind of reevaluate things and say,
Everything.
is this the right path anymore? What I'm
37 years of programming, just pulled the whole hard drive out and said, "Start again." Wipe the drive clean.
right,
Yeah, I
right.
figured this would be a fun conversation as all of us have owned or operated businesses in some form or fashion. So, yeah, excited for this one. I think we've just
So
got,
real quick, I just want to look on my phone because my brother told me that he knows someone at Sovereign. Let me just check real quick. Um,
yeah, usually how this rolls. We just have a bunch of
yeah,
basic
we're just gonna rip,
questions
but
and
I'm
talk
recording
about
now. But
anything
we'll
under the
we'll
sun out of boredom.
we'll
Sweet.
start. Um, who is it? I talked to my
So you
brother
were
every
a
day.
pitcher too there,
Yes, I
Justin
was.
W.
This is soon to be replaced by I've got a framed big white paper coming. So this will be set aside and put in a storage bin and never seen again. Probably my cool office art that I thought was cool 2 years ago is no longer cool anymore because it's not Bitcoin related. So
Daniel
Hey, on.
Frank.
Oh yeah, Daniel's the founder.
Okay. So my brother said he knows Daniel well. Spoke to him. Actually, I think
Yeah,
he
right
gave him
now
some
he's
seed capital.
yeah, right now Daniel is taking a leave. It's
Okay.
kind of like a health related leave, um, but he's amazing. Yeah, definitely a draw for me when I was looking to move into the business, and yeah, he put in a ton of work to lay the
Okay.
foundations. So that the ebook that you see on our website, the business case for Bitcoin, which we point a lot of people to,
Mm-hmm.
he was, you know, largely responsible for writing that.
Okay.
And it's like, I mean, I think we could sell it. Right now, we're giving it away as a lead magnet, but I think we could sell it, and
Absolutely.
people would find value enough to buy it because
Huge.
it's really solid, really
Yeah.
good starter, and is quick read.
Have
Not
you
gonna
have you
not
read it, Justin?
yeah, I've read about probably half of it,
Okay. Yeah.
first half, and then skimmed through the second half.
I think I read it like,
Not out of it was great all through it through. I just didn't have the time to read the second half yet.
yeah, it was a good one. So what are you hoping to achieve out of the podcast, John? Well, yeah, any kind of like framework? Where do you want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things that I like speaking about. One being, entrepreneurship, small business. It's not only something I've been into for like probably about 10 years or more, but it's like part of my family history. My mom, her dad, my dad to a certain extent, just small business and entrepreneurship you know, is one topic. Obviously, Bitcoin adoption within small business is
Yeah.
another topic that I'm speaking about a lot. Um, I was at, at BTC in DC is the most recent Bitcoin conference I attended, and Justin attended too. I helped moderate a panel with the topic of the new American dream, and how Bitcoin is starting to give hope to younger people in the face of all the chaos and all of the degradation that we're seeing
Hmm.
in society.
Right.
So we could go that route. And then another one of my favorite topics is if you've ever heard of John Perkins and his book uh, Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Hmm.
He talks a lot about the death economy versus the life economy, and he basically talks about how he was perpetuating the death economy his past career,
Hmm.
and how that's a very intentional setup, right? Of
Right.
basing the economy based on fear and debt and anxiety and
Hmm.
division. So I like talking about combating the death economy. I did a long podcast with our CEO at Sovereign about that. So really, we can go any number of different directions.
Okay.
I I just think you know we basically are at a very compelling time to just speak about what's on our mind,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And I don't know why it wasn't always the case, but right now it's just like let's just let it rip and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. I think we're gonna see what's that game Jenga? I think we're gonna see some Jenga towers fall soon with the fiat economy. It's shaky. I don't know if you saw a couple of hours ago, I think the White House correspondent just came out and said that they're not going to release any of the data from in terms of the numbers and the job reports during the government shutdown. And to me, that's pure code for the numbers are so bad. We want to rather have a scapegoat where we can blame someone else for when it's evident that our policies have now just completely gone backwards.
I mean, if you really dive into the weeds about fiat government, fiat money, it's just a big confidence game, and unfortunately, with a confidence game, when people's confidence runs out, the game's over,
Yeah.
and that the implications of that are pretty massive when so many people are reliant on the government, and yeah, I'm not like pleased to see it. I'm just thank God we have ways to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
think we
being a
all.
go ahead, Justin.
No, I was going to say, I just think that we all wish that it wasn't the case that we would need a economic armor, more or less, in terms of a sound monetary system that exists outside of this system. I think that we can all agree that we would rather have a world that doesn't have these issues and doesn't have the years that have ultimately led up to these issues. But
Yeah.
undoubtedly, it is something that is on our doorstep and everybody has to confront, or is more than likely already being affected by in this current time. It's an absolute. It's crazy just to go back to where you had an understanding of what you thought you understood of how this monetary system operated, and then in a matter of a couple of years, it could completely flip on its head when in terms of framework and viewing it in a completely different light, which ultimately is what drew me to talk to you. You were very insightful on your journey, so I definitely would like to get into some of the insights that kind of before Bitcoin. I feel like there was all of us in some form or fashion had primers that showed us bits and pieces of this fiat monetary system, but ultimately they kind of play a role. So ultimately, at some point, want to touch on those as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we
So
just kind of kick off and then we can just let it rip? I think you happy
yeah,
with that?
I'm
All
down.
right, perfect.
I'm down. Let's do it.
Okay, we are at our 10th episode in Measure and What podcast, and we have a good buddy of ours, fellow Bitcoiner John, who works with Sovereign, joining us tonight. John and Justin met, and Justin got him on the podcast. So super excited to dive into your story, John. Why don't you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and give us a little bit of a backstory on your Bitcoin journey?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. John Balkam. I'm serving as Chief Marketing Officer at Sovereign. I'm an entrepreneur and Bitcoiner from DC. So I was joking with Justin earlier, right in the fiat mothership. But I was
Fiat
born
mothership.
born and raised in this area. I do love it here, for all its warts. It is a beautiful place to live, and yeah, let's just dive in. I just joined Sovereign this year, but for the 6 years prior to Sovereign, I founded a company in the sports entertainment marketing industry, an agency called Third Wind Group, and that was, I was pretty much a completely different person when I founded that company. I've been interested in entrepreneurship and small business really since I graduated from Georgetown. I was in the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Program in the business school when I was there. And actually, this is an interesting point in how I came to Bitcoin. I was really struck by the concept of social entrepreneurship when I was in school. So you often hear this phrase, doing well by doing good. That appealed to me because I'm someone who I didn't want to go to Wall Street like many of my peers. I didn't want to go into, elite consulting firms and work for the man and work for big corporations doing what I perceived as meaningless work. But this concept of social entrepreneurship really appealed to me. And so that was kind of my idea when I got into entrepreneurship was, yeah, I want to provide value for other people. I want to contribute to society, but I also want to do really well. I want to, have abundance in my life, and that was my purpose behind starting companies. So, long story short, Third Wind Group has been an amazing experience. I started in 2019, but around 2022, I'm 3 years in. Somehow I survived the pandemic. Somehow I survived, my first years in business, at a incredible, chaotic time in the world.
Right.
But I started to, heard about Bitcoin in 2017, but it wasn't until 2022 where I really started paying attention. And like many people, read the Bitcoin Standard, Safety and Amos, started going deeper down the rabbit hole, started watching the Sailor series with Robert Breedlove, What is Money?
Hmm.
And it was one of those things where I would say there was before and after. There was my entire life leading up to, we'll call it April 2022, when I perceived the world one way. And then there was everything after, 3.5 years since then, where I started perceiving the world much more differently because of the lens that Bitcoin gives you. So, really, to wrap up my origin story from that point, right around April 2022, I just decided to basically go all in on Bitcoin personally, and then also starting to adopt Bitcoin as a treasury asset for that startup. And I'm sure people might have, people in my business school or people in my network probably thought I was crazy at the time. I didn't really talk about it actually, and we were just kind of quietly accumulating. But I think it saved our business. I think we would not have survived. I don't think Third Wind Group would still be operating today if we didn't make that bold move to start taking a portion of our earnings and just holding it in Bitcoin instead of holding it in dollars. And that business is still operating to this day. My business partner's CEO now. I've moved to chairman of the board. And now I'm completely focused on Sovereign. And the mission of Sovereign is to help small businesses all over the country, all over the world, understand and integrate Bitcoin into their operations and then manage it with confidence. So that's probably a good starting point. And yeah, I'm just really glad to be completely focusing on the mission of Bitcoin now and really use my personal story, my personal journey to help other business owners, other entrepreneurs.
Fantastic. That's an incredible story. It's pretty crazy. You were almost kind of to the month of the same time my life changed. Kind of BS. Everything before Satoshi was bullshit, and everything afterwards is just you see the world in a completely different light. Tell me a little bit more about what were the kind of dominoes that fell into place for the Bitcoin standard to fall into your lap? What was going on at that sort of time, and then what were some of the massive like shape shifting perception changes that happened for you to kind of grok Bitcoin?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. Since I was in the middle of year three of building a new business, I was very much in survival mode and very much on high alert for opportunities, things that could help me find an edge. I think when you're building a new business, you have to think of competitive advantage or unique value proposition or unique strategy that you can bring to the table. Otherwise, why are you building the business, right?
Hmm.
And so I was already kind of primed. I had that need to know in my life where it was a struggle. It was hard. I was making sacrifices, not making much money. But as an entrepreneur, also, you're always kind of looking for like 5, 10 years down the line, where are we headed? What are the big major trends? I think you need to place yourself in like where you are in history, and then also try and project out where are we going? Like what's the world going to look like in 10 years? So I was already trained as an entrepreneur and primed to look for opportunities and try and project out. And frankly, part of it too was I was overusing Twitter and the algorithm fed me more and more Bitcoin maximalist content, just encouraging me to read, encouraging me to study, encouraging me to check out Safety's book, encouraging me to check out certain podcasts. So it was a combination of things. I needed a solution to my business and how was I going to survive and then hopefully thrive over time. But on top of that, I already had that entrepreneurial mindset of looking for opportunities, looking for an edge. How am I going to position myself best to make this company a success?
Right.
So the other thing is, in reading the Bitcoin Standard, I mentioned before that I was looking to do well by doing good. What I kind of realized in reading how the traditional fiat monetary system works is that it's pretty much impossible to do well by doing good as an entrepreneur if you're using fiat money. Just by nature of fiat money is, unethical in the
Right.
way it operates. So I kind of realized like I could be the most profound, social entrepreneur of a generation, but if I was using fiat money, I would probably lose my way, or I'd kind of lose my mission, my sense of purpose in my business, and my sense of giving back to society.
Right. Right.
Right? Because I think most entrepreneurs inevitably they start the company, they're very altruistic, they're very in some ways kind of utopian, think about the world's gonna be so great in 5 or 10 years because I started this company.
Mm.
Well, somewhere along the journey, a lot of entrepreneurs end up having to go, put their hand out to banks for loans or to, investors for large investments. And then all of a sudden you're at the mercy of, the banks or the VCs, and they may not share your values. They may not share your same mission and purpose. So I kind of realized I could not complete my mission as a social entrepreneur if I just stuck with my status quo of using fiat money. So that really clicked for me, which is like, this is an ethical monetary system. I can start adopting this and I can stay true to my principles, particularly if I self-custody my Bitcoin. That gives me more autonomy to operate the way I want to operate, and I won't be at the mercy of people who don't share my values. So that was a huge unlock for me in realizing I actually kind of don't believe in the term social entrepreneurship anymore. I think entrepreneurs are in generally just good.
Right.
You're trying to produce value for other people. You're producing value for society,
Yeah.
right?
It's just
And
this fiat that's meshed in that causes the corruption.
exactly. So when that unlocked for me, I just felt like I have to go down this route. There's no turning back. This is going to be a very important technology for me, for my business. And then as I expanded out, community, my country, the world, it was a very eye-opening journey. All of 2022 and then most of 2023, I was just really going through a whole kind of transformation of my mindset, my mentality, and my worldview that was very disruptive, but then ultimately it's helped me down a path of growth and self-discovery and improvement, all that. And let's just say for listeners, it's worth it. It's worth it to go and study and do the work to understand Bitcoin, because the question is, do you want to continue, with the status quo, if even if it's comfortable, or would you rather have the truth that's uncomfortable? And
Yeah.
that for me, I realized that uncomfortable truth was going to be better for me in my life, and kind of accepting that has led me to a really cool place now. So I'm grateful that I've been able to go on that journey over the last several years.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting when it comes to the alignment that you ultimately get value wise with Bitcoin and where you want to go as an entrepreneur. All three of us are or were entrepreneurs in some form or fashion, and ultimately it's a very difficult game at certain points. But one question I wanted to ask, this kind of resonates with me, and kind of from the opposite light. Actually, I observed, just as you did, your parents, and you were talking a little bit beforehand about what your parents did and kind of what they showed you along the way when it comes to small business ownership and everything like that. For me, it was the exact opposite. I watched my parents and grandparents who just were regular 9 to 5, worked for the same companies for 40 years, all of that, which is perfectly fine. But I kind of saw the writing on the wall there that that might not be the best route for where I am and where the tides have turned more or less. So wanted to kind of question your thought process and kind of view really what you saw in them that kind of laid I don't know, maybe laid some light on the entrepreneurship world.
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit more, props to my mom because she has been a small business owner for over 30 years. And she works actually in lactation consulting, which is helping young mothers with breastfeeding, which, that's not the most lucrative field you can go into, as you might imagine. But for her, she always talked about how meaningful it is to her to be able to help mothers, help families, help children. And that's just, as I reflect now, that's just a very, very powerful example that she set to take that leap. She really started her business around the same time I was born, and I'm the fourth of four boys. So
Oh
she
wow.
started this business after, having four boys and built it up as she was raising four boys. So that was a big example for me. I really admire her journey quite a bit. And her dad also was a small business owner for most of his life, really. He and my uncle and my cousins, they ran a business called Johnston and Rhodes Bluestone in upstate New York. And my grandfather ran that business. He was still working pretty much every day until his mid 80s. So, I mean, pretty incredible. I mean, their Bluestone, it's used around the Supreme Court here in DC. It's used at Rockefeller Center in New York. It's all over Villanova. It's all over many beautiful spaces around the country. And yeah, my grandfather was a very, at least how I remember him, he's very quiet, very unassuming, but just, a powerhouse when it comes to, he was a hard worker. He was he had a high integrity. Everyone respected him. And he built quite a legacy for himself, for his family, uh, with, you know, in my mind, doing something that he enjoyed and doing something that was meaningful to him. So as you can see, this is a partly, nature versus nurture, right? This is partly a nature on my side. On my dad also did, independent consulting for some time, so he has a bit of that entrepreneurial, edge to him as well. But when it comes right down to it, I just feel like the 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 big corporate environment was never for me. And in fact, the largest company I've ever worked for, it got up to about 500 employees, but it was like 200 employees when I was there. And that it was a venture-backed startup, right? So it was very much a small, very motivated, mission-driven group of individuals. So I just knew from early on in my career that a big corporate environment was not going to be right for me. I was willing to make the trade-offs of less comfort and less stability to get that chance at more autonomy and to work on something meaningful for me. And it's definitely highly inspired by my folks, my parents, my grandparents. And it's now, I think more than ever, I think small business and entrepreneurship. We talked a little bit earlier before we started recording about kind of like a defense against all of these, big centralized entities. I think small business and entrepreneurship is going to be one of those things to
Huge.
where, all right, you can't get laid off. Maybe you will have to struggle a bit more and work harder and spend more hours and risk some of your capital to start a small business and run a small business. But you can't get laid off if you're the
Yeah,
boss,
you have
right?
some sovereignty there.
And you have amazing technology at your disposal, like Bitcoin, but other technologies as well, internet technologies, and many other things that I think there may not be a better time to start a business than today. Um, but it's still like, I think that people need to realize how little these corporations care for them, right? And how much more meaningful it is to own your own thing, even if it means you have to sacrifice certain creature comforts along the way.
Absolutely. Well, that's an incredibly inspiring story. I want to go back and give some props to your mom. I don't know what's more of an achievement, running a business for 30 years or raising four boys. And then the combination of the two is just, that's seriously impressive. Take me back to the Bitcoin journey that you were going through in sort of 2022, 2023, when you were learning all the lessons that we as, now Bitcoiners learn. Were there any that kind of stuck out to you that was like really kind of a shaking or a shake awake, in terms of how the whole world works, and just kind of an uncovering of this fiat mothership, as you alluded to earlier, that we're all living on, that's just basically, careening off a cliff.
So I had heard about Bitcoin 2016, 2017. I read maybe one book about it in 2017. But the reason things started to click for me in 22 was that in Seyfedin Amis's book, he covers Austrian economics.
Right.
And I think what was missing in 17, what I was reading, it was more just the technical side of Bitcoin and crypto assets, but I didn't get the economics of it because I, like everybody else, was brought up under and taught, Keynesian economics, which
Mm.
didn't make sense to me at the time, right? It didn't make sense at all, but I just kind of went with it because you know what? They weren't teaching any other economics in business
Yeah.
school.
And for kids
So,
that don't know the difference, Keynesian economics says we've got a problem with debt, and the only way to solve it is to have more debt, in a nutshell.
right. It's like an individual saying, I've maxed out all my credit cards, so I need to take out another credit card to pay off my old credit cards. And
Yeah.
that was one of the realizations of like, wow, that is so wrong and so messed up. But from the Austrian perspective, they look at economics as individuals making decisions under conditions of scarcity. And that
Mm.
just makes sense, right? Because we're all human beings. We've all been making decisions since from a very young age, or certainly when we got into adulthood. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to make decisions that help me survive, and then second, I'm trying to help make decisions that help me thrive eventually, whatever that means for you. And so when I got that perspective, when I kind of understood that, I was like, oh yeah, it's impossible to centrally plan an economy. It's impossible because you can't control 8 billion individuals who are all self-interested, who are all trying to survive and thrive. So once I understood that, I was like, oh man, yeah, everything I might have learned about economics before is completely wrong, based on false assumptions. So that was one big one. I think the second one that just really opened my eyes was learning the history of banking
Hmm.
and basically the tie between central banking and the Great Wars, the World War I, World War II in the 20th century. And again, it just was I mean, honestly, parts of 22 were pretty dark when I came to realize that. these large wars that killed, hundreds of millions of people would not have happened if not for central banking, because governments would have run out of resources to fund the wars if they hadn't been able to print money out of thin air. And once I understood that, I think something clicked in me where I realized I have to go on this journey to, number one, help myself, protect myself, right? And number two, trying to, spread the word to other people, because frankly, I don't want to live through World War III, and I don't want to live through the horrors that, people in the 20th century did.
Yeah.
And unless people wake up to the fact that central banking and the fiat monetary system is fuel for the war machine, there will be more wars, and there, in fact, it's possible to have another gigantic great war like in the 20th century, right? Central banking enables world wars. They would not happen if governments were using honest money. And citizens around the world were using honest money that couldn't be conjured up out of thin air. So that, it became definitely self-interest. I get into it like everybody else for number go up, but then I also got interested in it from a moral and philosophic perspective, where it's like, yeah, I want to look, I'm a young man. I hopefully will live for another 50, 60 years, and I don't want to live through another like war like this. And not only that, there's just so many other things that fiat money degrades throughout society.
Oh.
And so again, I had this mentality of like, we can use business as a force for good. But now that I had that Bitcoin plugin, I said, we can use business with Bitcoin as a force for good. That clicked for me. I was like, that's it. That was my missing piece. I didn't understand this piece of why things seemed to be getting worse, even though we had all this, amazing technology. I didn't understand the economics, the monetary system, the financial system. Once I understood that, I was like, now I have real mission and purpose. And it made me reevaluate if I wanted to keep building the business I was building. Sure enough, 3 years later, I did, step aside running that business and join Sovereign. But man, was it a real awakening, a rude awakening to understand these elements of, why the world went insane and went into world wars and continued to wage war pretty much constantly throughout the 20th century and up to today.
There's an element in your journey. I'll just go quick, and Justin's going to jump in next. There's an element in your Bitcoin journey where it does get dark, because you start realizing that things around you, are affected by this fiat money, and it's not good for humanity. It benefits a very small section of the population right at the top that have their hands on the levers of the money printer, but everyone else suffers. It's so extractionary, and the end result of unsound money is, as you said, wars. So that's you in my journey, certainly, to speak on that, there was a time in there where it got kind of dark, and there was kind of anger and a lot of negative emotions that you kind of clear out when you see the light of Bitcoin after that. So jump in, Jazzy.
Yeah, no, it's that's the truth. I remember going to one of my first Bitcoin meetups. I hadn't fully grasped the whole concept of the protocol and what it could mean for society. But to John's point, I come from a school that actually taught Austrian economics, and so I really grasped that part of it. And then prior to even understanding Austrian economics, I loved history. So then it was backtracking throughout history, kind of mapping over the monetary happenings. So very similar understanding on your end and mine, but at the end of the day, again, it was a very dark period. And at that Bitcoin meetup, one of the guys was like, "Hey, man, like I know you're relatively new to all this, and like this is great, but just like be careful. Like it does get to a point where it's like, wow, there was a lot that was taken time, effort, energy from just thinking about my parents and grandparents and who have existed and didn't even know that this game was being played around them this entire time throughout all of their lives and all of their working lives for the most part. So it is dark, but ultimately it does lead you to the point where it's like, okay, it's time to move. It's time to make sure that others don't get run over by this same machine and some people have no idea that there's even a game being played. But on to better things. Let's move into Sovereign as a whole. Kind of give us the 30,000-foot view of Sovereign, what they're doing, what their goals are. And I've got both Justin and I have some questions for you.
Yeah, so really the vision with Sovereign is imagine a world where Bitcoin is on every balance sheet. And that's kind of our North Star where we're starting from. We do believe that sound money and Bitcoin being the best form of money, the best form of sound money that we've come up with so far, we believe that if we can help adoption specifically within the small to medium sized business arena, that we can really improve things quite a bit. It won't necessarily be a silver bullet to solve all of our problems, but we can solve the money problem, and it will help us solve other problems.
It's going to be the biggest lead domino for every other problem downstream. If you knock that money problem over, everything else becomes a lot easier.
Right. And we're focusing on small to medium sized businesses because we don't want to live in a world where just publicly traded companies own most of the Bitcoin, or just, publicly traded companies plus the BlackRock and Fidelity ETF and, large government entities own most of the Bitcoin. We want to live in a world where it's decentralized, not just in the sense of the money that we use, but we have more and more entrepreneurship, more and more small business ownership, and more people doing things that they want to do, that they can serve their community specifically. Part of the reason, in my mind, like there's a lot of malaise and a lot of just kind of, I don't know, people are just not feeling the vibes right now, is because everything is so cookie cutter and corporate around America, around the world. And the antidote to that is many more small businesses in their communities, who are providing high quality goods and services. And then they are able to save the fruits of their labor in a sound money, in a hard money that will help them sustain themselves over the long term. So that's our vision, is we at Sovereign want to help small business owners understand, integrate, and manage Bitcoin for the long haul. We're not advising them to look at any other crypto assets. We're not advising them to trade or to try and time the market. We're advising them to understand Bitcoin, and we'll walk you through that. We're helping you to pick the right, providers. There's all kinds of different companies that you could work with, but we're curating and tailoring the companies that we feel are best in class. And then we're helping you with the technical side, because it can get very complex. And so we have expert technical support to help you through self-custody, or help you through accepting payments, or help you through employee benefits. And in a way, Sovereign, we're just trying to be kind of a boring professional services company, but it's anything but boring, because we're essentially trying to help small businesses transform themselves into a Bitcoin savvy company. Right. And the exciting part about that is, like, just this week, Square just rolled out Square Bitcoin to 4 million sellers.
Huge.
On their platform. And so that's very exciting, and that should make our job a little bit easier. But frankly, there's like 34, 36 million small to medium-sized businesses in the US alone. All right. So you do the math, like even if just the small businesses wanted to get one Bitcoin, not everyone could get one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That doesn't even account for nonprofits, or it doesn't even account for, single member, small businesses. So the fact of the matter is, we're trying to go that route because that's the type of world we want to live in. We want to live in that world where we're not completely dominated by the Magnificent Seven companies. We're not forced to buy from Amazon all the time, or we're not
Mm.
forced to buy from Google all the time. The mom and pop has a chance now because they can save in hard money and they can self custody hard money, and that will give them a fighting chance in an extremely challenging economy to operate in. So that's what we're in for. That's our mission, and I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to play a big part in that.
That's super cool. I mean, when I learned in the Bitcoin journey that, you're competing with these massive multinational companies that have access to capital at a way better rate than you're fighting, you're swimming upstream as a small business owner. So the fact that you can now play on a level playing field with money that no one can corrupt, and that one Bitcoin's one Bitcoin, and you can, if you own that Bitcoin, it's not going to be debased by other people being able to access massive loans at virtually for 0% interest that just start flooding the market with more and more fiat. That's incredible. Talk me through what it looks like for an average small business that works with you. Are they reaching out to you for help with your consulting services, or are you actively kind of marketing to them to get them on the Bitcoin journey? Where in the process are these small businesses that you're working with?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. And in fact, some of our early clients have been folks who are already Bitcoiners, but they're perhaps looking to level up their game a bit, or they have specific questions on how to operate with Bitcoin better.
Hmm.
So there is a little bit of people coming to us, but we also are going to go make an active effort to reach out to businesses proactively. Now, we lead with education, and one of the most prominent things that we launched with was a free ebook called The Business Case for Bitcoin, which anybody can download on our website, Sovereign, SOVREIGN.io. And it's 80 pages. You can read it in one afternoon, but it's a great primer. And between that and our newsletter and our blog and our podcast, like, frankly, like, even if you don't work with us and pay us for professional services, like, we want to be a resource for you, because a big part of the ethos of Bitcoin is open source. And like, information wants to be free. Information is free, can be free if we
Mm.
put it out there. So that's usually where we start, and a lot of people will find us from our ebook or from our podcast, or we appear on other people's podcasts, or we're now speaking at conferences. I met Justin at BTC in DC, where we led a couple panels. So that's, people usually find us through that. But we also are going to go. We have actually a sales team that's spread out around the country and around the world. We even have a salesperson on our team from Argentina. We have people, really, who we think that while this is digital technology, we're going to build trust and we're going to build relationships with business owners by meeting them face to face to talk with them about money, talk with them about Bitcoin. It is a very uncomfortable topic, but I think we're getting to that point where it's more uncomfortable to not talk about it,
Mm.
not do anything about it, than to talk about it and to do something about it. So that's where we usually meet people. We will usually try to meet face to face and talk about their challenges with inflation. That usually will resonate with the business owner, because they'll say, man, my input costs have been going up like crazy over the last 5 years, and I'm ready to look for solutions. In fact, we heard from a restaurant owner in Montana this week who, filled out our form on our website and said, I'm ready to learn. I want to talk to you guys about this because I'm getting crushed, right, with my business costs. So that's how it begins. And then we have a very kind of, consultative approach, and you can basically just buy consulting hours with Sovereign, or you can work with us on an ongoing basis for some type of project, or you can kind of retain us for 6 to 12 months, 24 months to kind of transform your business with
Mm.
Bitcoin. So you can go, completely just use our free resources, or you can basically embed us into your team for a period of time to really help you, get deep understanding, transform your business, integrate Bitcoin into your operations and just go all in. So we try and provide that range of options for our clients.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and so again, it's something that's most definitely needed if you kind of look at the world and the monetary world that is at a individual level. It's getting tougher and tougher for individuals to get by, and there's definitely no difference between the individual small businesses and the individual themselves. In that case, inflation and debasement are slowly but surely eating away at everybody in some form or fashion, whether it's a small paper cut to some of the larger businesses and corporations or actual gashes to some of these other smaller businesses. You said that input costs are rising. What specifically, like, I didn't know if like insurance or rent or any of those for small businesses, like which ones do y'all hear constantly? Again, there's certain inflation is not the same across the board with certain items or inputs that go into businesses. So obviously affects different spots at different times and at different rates. So what are y'all hearing the most about issue wise?
You know what's interesting is that we have really been industry agnostic so far. And so there's pretty much different perspectives and different stories from every client. And it's not necessarily one, part of their business that, we're noticing costs going up over here. They're just saying, we're working our butts off and we can't seem to get ahead, or we always seem to be treading water. So we've worked with restaurants. We're working with a gym in Long Island. We're working with a dentist. We're working with all kinds of different businesses. And so the fact is, this problem is getting severe enough that, all kinds of business owners are waking up.
Yeah.
And that's I think why a lot of times when you're an entrepreneur, like timing is one of the biggest things. Like if we had started this business in 2019, we would have floundered for several years. But I think we're in that right time where the pain is significant enough that business owners are seeking relief. Like we talked about before. First, I'm trying to survive, but then I'm trying to thrive. And in some cases, when we're talking to a client, we don't focus so much about the challenges that they're facing. Sometimes we focus more about, like, one of my teammates who brought in the gym in Long Island. Those are kind of friends of his, and he goes to that gym. And the way he pitched it to them was more aspirational. Like, you guys have built this incredible business. You guys have been working so hard, but you've had to sacrifice certain things. Like maybe you've put off marriage, or perhaps you've put off buying that house. And it's like, how are you going to get there? I know you want to get there one day. I'm sure your business isn't the only thing in your life that's important to you. So we'll talk to business owners about their challenges, but then we'll also talk to them about their aspirations. Say, like, man, Bitcoin can be a real tool to help you, even beyond your business goals, right? It can give you that opportunity to become a homeowner if you want, or to, who knows, like it's one of those things where we we try and read the client, and we try and understand what's going to help it click for them.
Yeah.
So while we have all these different talking points that we can rattle off about Bitcoin, we're always trying to go back to the individual that we're speaking with and, like, all right, what is it about Bitcoin that helps you and resonates with you? And that's where we usually have success.
Yeah, I can speak to the inflation section of owning a business, and it was pretty much across the board because it just has a compounding effect and just a downward spiral on everything. Your materials. There was a stage in 2022 when we were getting. I ran a construction business, and I was getting emails from our suppliers every couple of weeks with significant price, increases, and that just has such a big knock-on effect on the entire business. And then I can also speak to the fact that my employees were definitely feeling the pinch, from inflation, and just in terms of cost of living. They were living hand to mouth, kind of, paycheck to paycheck, week to week. And yeah, we pushed some of the prices up, but you get to a point where you can't just keep pushing these prices, on and on and on. People eventually, your customers are experiencing a pinch. So then they put off that decision. So your business just gets constricted in terms of, from all angles. And you're fighting this common theme of just this toxic money that is losing its value incredibly fast. And it starts hitting you from all angles. And, if I didn't find Bitcoin, I promise you, I think I would have had an anxiety attack, because I felt like I was going to war, literal war, every day with just the amount of issues that I was getting. And once you understand that the main cause of all of these issues is just this broken money, it's actually not broken. I've been thinking about this recently. It's not actually broken. It's perfect money, but it's only designed for the very small few people at the top. And you can't enforce these rules on these people, because you can't trust them to not debase the money. And so it's not broken money. It's just we need to move to a money that we cannot, that it cannot be debased, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's just unethical, unsound money, right?
Yeah.
It's working for the people who operate the monetary system. But
Yeah.
I wanted to comment on your point of um, the second and third order consequences when you're a small business going up against large corporations. The knock-on effects of inflation is that generally small businesses, when they come in, they have really high inflationary environments like that, they usually eventually tap out and sell to a larger company who can access, low interest rate money
Yeah.
with relative ease, right? By nature of the fact that they are much larger, they have more capital. It's easier when you have more capital to go and get a low interest rate loan and just keep swallowing up more capital and more
Hmm.
assets. That's People are upset with politicians about wealth inequality. And I get it, because that's the face that you're given as, like, these are the people who are in charge, and they're going to, they're responsible for when things are going well and when things are not going well. But frankly, wealth inequality comes from the nature of fiat money, which just leads to, like, here's the game, guys. Like, if you can get access to lots and lots of low interest rate debt, you win, because you just use the low interest rate debt to buy more assets. The assets keep going up because the inflation drives them up, and then you just rinse and repeat. You keep going back to your bank and saying, give me more free money, or next to
Yeah.
free money. Let me go swallow up some more small businesses. And so it's this vicious cycle that, again, I'm so passionate about going to the mom and pop and the small business, because I don't want if they want to sell to a larger company, great, but I don't want them to be forced to sell to
Mm.
a larger company when they don't want to. And the reason why they have to sell is because they can't get access to the cheap capital,
And that's
can't get
best case
access to the
scenario,
cheap debt.
that they
Yes.
can sell, because a lot of times they can't sell. I mean,
Mm.
I've done a lot of buying and selling of businesses, and let me tell you, if it's not every day that a small business, that a large business is knocking on your door to hand you a massive check, because they want your assets. And usually, if you're struggling, they're not going to buy you, and then you go out of business, and that's why businesses fail. The statistics are crazy in terms of how uh, small businesses fail. Um, and a lot of that, I would say the biggest factor in that is the fact that the money is just getting debased, and they just cannot keep ahead of this perpetual treadmill that it just starts spinning out of control, and they just, not able to keep up.
Yeah, it's fun to watch from my end. Or I have a small business, and I also still work for a residential land development company paired with a building company, and they also play in that same field of they have their business, what they do, how they operate. Then on the back end of it, they've got a lot of single family homes that they own, and that is their more or less their treasury asset in the Bitcoin world, as we like to call it. But that's how they fund their operations at the end of the day. Low interest. We need to take out a loan against these. I don't know how many it is. It's a lot of single family homes that they own and rent. So, I mean, it's constant cash flow there, and it keeps the whole machine alive. And they're a medium sized builder in the Richmond area, about 100 homes a year, roughly, give or take. But that bottom group that we show pretty much every year at our yearly meeting is, hey, here's the new bottom, and it's a constant cycle of these smaller builders just getting knocked off, just solely due to the fact that they cannot lend or borrow at these rates that other either national builders can, or the medium sized builders that have access to assets and capital in that manner. But little side note there, but it's funny to watch. It really helped me understand why you need to be holding assets. Kind of a primer for me there. But what is two things? One that interests me. I didn't know exactly how y'all handled this, and I wanted to ask, but you brought it up briefly earlier. When it comes to employee benefits or bonuses or anything like that, is that something Sovereign focuses on? How do y'all handle that? Because that's been something I've been wondering about on how consulting firms like y'all's or in general in the Bitcoin space kind of handle that, because I think it's something that could be very beneficial. Incentives matter, and when you can incentivize employees to do good work by giving them an asset that, or a form of money, it's not an asset, but a form of money that holds value over time and appreciates rather than one that depreciates, it's pretty positive in the incentive column.
Yeah, we have a model where we will do the best that we can with the roster of talent that we have at Sovereign. But then to expand our reach and expand our capacity, we do strategic partnerships. So as it relates to employee benefits, that's not something that we specifically provide services on, but there are companies like Block Rewards that have been starting up to address this issue of using Bitcoin as an employee benefit. We don't specifically partner with them, but that's a type of example of how we might work with a company where we will help you get dialed in with acquiring Bitcoin, with custodying Bitcoin, with taking Bitcoin as payment, with accounting for it, and we'll get you squared from that perspective. But if a business asks us about, I'm really intrigued about using Bitcoin as a potential, incentive for my employees, we are not afraid to go to our partner network and say, hey, we have this client, they're trying to get this done. Would you be interested in working with them? So that makes a beautiful space for Sovereign to kind of be friend to all in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So in some ways, we're kind of like at the very top of the funnel for a lot of these companies. So they're happy to set up referral agreements with us to say, hey, you refer a client to us, we'll kick back revenue to you. In the same way, if one of our clients wants to refer one of their friends who's a business owner to us, we'll kick back revenue to them. So it creates this really cool scenario where we're just kind of playing point guard. And we're dishing out clients to River and Unchained, and we're dishing out maybe Block Rewards over time. We might work with them, but I think with employee benefits, where it could go is a scenario where companies, just like companies would provide, health incentives or gym memberships or things like that in employee benefits packages, they will start to offer Bitcoin, but tie it to years of service. So you could start accumulating a Bitcoin reward at year one, at year two, at year three, or at year four of service. And in fact, you as an employee, your life won't really change at all. You'll keep getting your fiat paycheck. You'll keep getting your health benefits, what have you. But perhaps on your 4-year anniversary of working with a company, they will release however many sats that you accumulated due to your service time that you'll have negotiated up front, which to me is kind of incredible, because you can, as a business owner, you're putting so much time into recruiting, hiring, developing your talent that, well, man, how do I keep them from going and pursuing a job at one of the big tech companies who I can possibly compete with on compensation packages? Well, I mean, it would be pretty easy for us to accumulate Bitcoin on behalf of our employees, but then kind of hold it as a term of employment to say, you know what, we value like long-term relationships at this company, and so we're going to hold this asset and release it to you, based on your service time. So something like that could occur. Something along the lines of, perhaps paying bonuses, like incentives for, performance. I know not every company does incentives, like bonuses based on performance, but that's another potential route. But I think these are short-term ways to help people get more comfortable with Bitcoin without them having to handle it themselves,
Yeah.
or without having to. So it's like how Fold will give you a debit card and you're just spending dollars, but you're receiving Bitcoin rewards with every purchase. So you actually don't have to change your behavior that much in order to start benefit from Bitcoin. So
I think
that's
that's a
something
great
that,
hack for an employee to, have that as an incentive to stay on with the company. But on the other side of that is it's basically a forced saving plan where you hold Bitcoin for long enough, you're going to then really see the benefit for it. You stay on for 4 years, you would have, kind of ridden through the cycle. I don't even know if the cycle's still alive anymore. But in terms of time period, you hold for 4 to 5, 6, 7 years. What you earned in year one actually is appreciated, and now you get to reap the benefits for your loyalty to the company over time, as opposed to just a rapidly depreciating fiat monetary reward. You get something that you can watch and see is actively growing over time, over a long enough scale.
look,
That's huge.
I think we're going to hear about Bitcoin pensions in the future.
Absolutely.
I don't know if anybody's talking about that per se, but it's like, you heard about companies like Ford back in the day would having these incredible pensions for their loyal employees. And a lot of people didn't bounce around to different employers throughout their career. They just kind of start with a company, work there for 30, 35 years, retire, and then they would be good to go.
Yeah.
They'd have their pension and they'd be good to go and live a nice life for, the next 20 or 30 years. So maybe we will hear about Bitcoin pensions in the near future, but that would be more so the companies just holding a treasury for all of their employees, right? And
Yeah.
then there's a little bit of complexity on like how do you manage that, or what should our accumulation rate be, or and then how are we going to distribute it? So, look, I don't think there's going to be any lack for people like us at Sovereign who are we're not necessarily technical, although we do have very technical people on the team. But people like me, our CEO, comes from traditional finance. Our CRO, he came from Salesforce and kind of like, tech sales and stuff like that. Where we come in is that we're just business people, and we're trying to help solve business problems for owners and operators. We're just doing it specifically with Bitcoin, but there's lots of different problems that Bitcoin can solve for
Yeah.
your small business, including, this might be a whole nother podcast, but I think the idea of Bitcoin as brand is starting to gain traction. And
Hmm.
my example on that is Steak and Shake, which frankly I had never heard of Steak and Shake before. Maybe that's just because I'm an East Coast guy, and there's no Steak and Shake within probably 300 miles of here. Not that I know of. But then this year, we hear that they are accepting Bitcoin on site at their point of sale for their food. And then, boom, transforms the company in 6 months.
Yeah.
And now
They're
they've been,
accepting Bitcoin and they got rid of seed oils, which is pretty cool. So
this is the,
they're adapting the Bitcoin ethos of just all the other downstream effects of sound money is sound life, sound health. It's super exciting.
this is the journey that everybody goes through. You realize it once you realize you don't have enough Bitcoin, then you realize you don't have enough beef in your life. Then you
There you
realize you don't
go.
have enough beef tallow in your life. And then people are kind of wondering, why you're talking about beef tallow so much, but it's all started with the Bitcoin journey.
That's incredible. I love that. I think we should definitely do another podcast of that with kind of the second, third order effects of what Bitcoin does to your business and how that downstream effect of just sound money has an incredible impact on everything.
Yeah, man. I'm optimistic with everything. What I'm passionate about is, you know, like we started this conversation with using business and using Bitcoin to improve people's lives, improve society, um, and we're already starting to see it. Like when I started my Bitcoin journey, it really felt like things were kind of hopeless, or like I can't believe nobody's seeing this.
Hmm.
But that's just that was just my high time preference of like, how come not, how come everybody isn't seeing this like I am? And how come, adoption isn't going super fast? Um, but now that I'm about three, maybe, up to almost 4 years into the journey, I'm starting to see things, dominoes start to fall where it's like, okay, yeah, the path is here.
The
The
natural
path,
cadence is kicking in.
the path is here for us to really make this work. And man, I think it's going to be pretty incredible 5, 10 years down the line. Um, and I'm just happy to be contributing to this and part of this story.
That's awesome. Justin, you want to wrap us up? Any final questions and thoughts?
I think the one final thought or question, maybe for any small business owners that are listening or medium sized business owners, what's the one thing that business owners can start doing tomorrow to at least get a Bitcoin focused policy in place that's not even needing to go to sovereign for any advice on anything? What is the one thing? Is it the education? Is it a singular book, y'all's potentially, or a single practice that they could implement tomorrow?
I would just encourage business owners to ask themselves, what is our treasury strategy? Have you even talked about that or thought about that before? Like, where do you store the value that you bring in as a business? Just ask yourself and have that discussion with, your business partners, your top executives. Like, frankly, it's kind of amazing that this hasn't been much of a conversation like treasury strategy
Hmm.
in business, because if you really think about it, you're working your ass off to earn and grow something. Well, you know, shouldn't you also think about how to protect what you earn? So that would be kind of a first step, is before even going down into Bitcoin is like, do we even have a treasury strategy right now? Like, where are we saving our rainy day fund? You know, are we just keeping it in cash? Are we using money market funds? Do we have gold, in a safe in the back office? Like, what is our treasury strategy? That's actually a great way to just start the conversation. And many business owners would probably say, I don't have a treasury strategy. I'm hand to mouth. I'm just trying to, cover my bills, you know, on a weekly, monthly basis. That is kind of the first step to realize, like, I should be thinking, as hard as I think about ways to increase, what I earn and increase my profits, I should be thinking just as hard as how do I preserve my capital once I get it into my business. So that's
Absolutely.
just a great place to start, and will spark a lot of ideas as to like, oh, actually maybe Bitcoin is a potential part of our plan and part of our strategy.
Yeah, I think there's far too many small to medium business owners that are way too focused on the P&L and completely disregard the balance sheet. And when you start realizing that they're going to play hand in hand, and actually the balance sheet over time should become the bigger part of the business than the day-to-day P&L, that's when you actually have a business worth owning, and you can then fulfill your mission.
Yeah, and then right after that, you end up questioning, okay, well, where do I store this? And then you say, oh, there's this monetary asset that has zero barrier to entry. I don't have to chalk up 400 $500,000 to buy a single family house to sit on as a asset to hold, just to preserve myself and my capital against inflation. So, one thing leads to another, and you end up starting a Bitcoin treasury operation, going to sovereign right after that.
And then before you know it, you're into beef tallow, you're into, getting a lot of
Carnivore
sun,
diets.
getting a lot of sun. And listen, just trust us. You'll get there. It's part of the journey. But start with Bitcoin. The rest will fall into place from there.
That's awesome. John, really appreciate your time coming on and chatting to us. It was awesome. And I hope we can set up another time to dig deeper into the downstream effects of Bitcoin on small businesses.
It was a lot of fun, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Don't log off yet. Just hold on. Let me just stop that.
Yeah, I've seen
That was
this.
fun.